So I'd like to kick things off tonight by asking you a question. By a show of hands, who's ever had the experience of being in the car with your parents or an older family member and arguing over what music to play on the radio? Right? Almost everybody, right? Something we all can relate to. And I think you know that if I got your parents in here and I asked them the same question, they'd probably raise their hands too. In fact, I've been told that my own grandmother hated the Beatles so much that when she saw them play on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, she said that night was the beginning of the end for Western civilization. They were like, "I want to hold your hand." She was like, "No, you don't." So parents fight with their kids over music. The government and radio stations will try to censor it. It's at the heart of so much controversy. As great as music is, it seems to have this power to divide us sometimes, right? But let me ask you another question. Who has ever had the opposite experience? Who has ever felt united by music? It could be at a great concert, the national anthem before a football game, just talking about music with your friends. Raise your hands. Almost everybody again. Music makes us feel connected to each other. It has this amazing ability to make us feel like we're part of something bigger than we are. So we know that music has these two very opposite effects on us. It can bring us together, or it can tear us apart. What if there was like a hack in the system, a cheat code almost, that we can use so that instead of fighting over music all the time, we can use it as a tool to unite us? Because as you know, everybody has very strong opinions about music. And we can fight over these opinions all day, but at the end of the day, opinions are just that. They're opinions. Here's a fact. Right now, I am standing on this stage, and I am literally looking out at the future. The young people in this college, and all the young people, whether they're in school or not, you guys are inheriting a world that is, in many ways, more divided than it has ever been before. Divided across cultural lines and political lines, social and economic lines. And we know you didn't ask for this, but we are counting on somebody, maybe one of you, to fix it. That's a lot of pressure, right? I got anxiety just saying it to you. Everybody is giving you all this responsibility, but you know what nobody is giving you? Suggestions. They're like, go out and fix the world, kids. You'll figure it out. By the way, can you do something about global warming? It's hot outside, right? And you're out here like, what? What? Really? That's it? That's all you got for me? Can you, I don't know, put up some solar panels or something, man? Come on. I've got an idea for you. I think that if we're going to move forward and bridge these gaps between us, we really need to understand each other better. And if we're going to reach this understanding, not just with the people that we agree with, but with the people that we disagree with, we need tools. I think that music can be a tool, but I think that we have to go about things in the right way. Because we can talk all day about the music that unites us and why it unites us, and that's fine. But I think that if we're really going to heal these wounds and build these bridges, we need to go further. We need to talk more about the music that divides us. We need to understand why it divides us. And a lot of people will point to cultural reasons, and they're absolutely right. Music has always been a social phenomenon as well as an art form. Music has a way, particularly popular music, of accentuating the differences between generations and how they see the world. And we have so many examples of this throughout history. Elvis shook his hips on TV. People weren't ready for that. Bob Dylan encouraged young people to question authority and speak their minds. People got upset by that. But all these cultural and political reasons, while they are very important and we can't ignore them, I don't think they go far enough. I think that we need something deeper. We need something that gets to the heart of the sound of music itself. Something more than just the lyrics or the way Elvis dances or whatever. I also think that people make a mistake sometimes, and they believe that controversy is something new to music. They think it started with rock and roll or maybe jazz. That if we go back far enough, maybe to something like classical music, then everybody would just be more civil about things. The thing is, the history doesn't really back that up. Let's take Beethoven, for example. Nowadays, nobody messes with Beethoven. For a lot of people, he's practically synonymous with classical music. And even if you think you don't know any classical music, you probably recognize this. That's from Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Probably the most recognized piece of music in the world. Possibly the most popular symphony ever written. But if you went back to 1808, when people first heard this thing, and you told everybody that Beethoven's Fifth Symphony would be as popular as it is today, they would have looked at you like you were crazy. They would have been like, what, Beethoven, his Fifth Symphony? Ludwig van Beethoven, that's the Beethoven we're talking about? Nah. That's because the premiere of the Fifth Symphony was a disaster. People didn't know what to make of all the new things that Beethoven was doing. The audience was just confused. In fact, the music was so complex that the orchestra had to stop in the middle and start over again. And there were a lot of reasons for why this happened. You know, the concert was very long. There weren't enough rehearsals. We know these things are true. But they don't really fully explain why, back in his day, Beethoven was Mr. Controversy. His music inspired such strong reactions in people, and the Fifth Symphony was no different. A fellow composer at the time named Louis Spohr called the Fifth Symphony an orgy of vulgar noise. One source says that the famous poet Goethe said that it was a threat to civilization. And these two guys were Beethoven's friends. What happened here? You know, it's a symphony. It didn't have any words. It certainly didn't have any dancing. So what was it about the music itself that made people react this way? Historians and musicologists have been asking these questions for hundreds of years, not just about Beethoven's music, but about music in general. And in the last couple of decades, neuroscientists have gotten in on the act as well. And what's amazing is that all of these experts from all these different fields, they all seem to agree on one thing, that one of the things that gets us riled up about music, one of the things that gets us upset, is newness, uniqueness, originality, sounds and tone colors and chords and rhythms that people have never heard before. That's what gets under people's skin. And to understand why this works, you really have to understand how hearing works. Because your ears are just receptors. All the sounds of the world hit them all at once like a tidal wave, and it's your brain's job to make sense of it all. And what science believes is that one of the ways your brain does this is by seeking out and recognizing patterns. Your brain loves patterns. It's an amazing skill that we developed back in the caveman days to let us know that if we heard a bird in the tree, things were cool. But if we heard a saber-toothed tiger somewhere, it was time to run. Now, this same skill that kept us from becoming food now helps us make sense of the world around us, including music. By seeking out these patterns, your brain makes connections. It develops expectations. And when your brain picks up on one of these patterns, and it gets what it's expecting, it feels comforted. But when it can't find a pattern, or when it thinks it has a pattern, but things take a wrong turn, that's what makes people upset. That could make people agitated. Your brain feels on edge. Some people find it exciting, some people don't. And it's no coincidence that music is jam-packed with patterns, right? In Western music, these patterns are so ingrained that we sometimes call them the rules. It's the reason we know that if I play do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, I'm going to end up on do. These are the patterns that we've come to live with. These are the patterns we know. These are the things we expect. Let's look at some more examples through history. In the 1940s, guys like Charlie Parker here were developing a new style of jazz called bebop. Bebop was faster and harder and more complex than any of the jazz that had come before it. Music aficionados, even jazz aficionados, couldn't get their heads around it at first. Duke Ellington famously said that playing bop was like playing Scrabble with all the vowels missing. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it doesn't sound like a compliment to me. Give it a couple of years, though. Ask all the young jazz guys who they want to play like. Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk. The bebop players are their heroes. We look back on bebop as one of the greatest innovations that ever hit jazz. But, admittedly, bebop was a little intense, so let's take it down a notch. This handsome gentleman is Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby, everybody. How did people fight about Bing Crosby? He sang White Christmas. He did The Little Drummer Boy with David Bowie. He never even raised his voice, for God's sake. Actually, that was part of the problem. You see, Bing was one of the first crooners. These were guys who got up way close to the microphone and sang soft, slow songs like they were whispering in your ear. And people were having none of it. They said it was too sexual, it was too obscene. The New York Singing Teachers Association said that crooning corrupts the minds and ideals of the younger generation. Now you can't have a holiday party without this guy. And if that one was surprising to you, imagine my surprise when I learned that in 1966, my grandma was a Beatles fan and she was stealing my mom's records. All of these people I talked about, they all have something in common. Beethoven, Bing Crosby, Charlie Parker, the Beatles. They all pushed the limits of music as they knew it and did something new. They endured some backlash, but in the end, we recognize them as trailblazers. So you might be asking yourself, how does this keep happening? Why is it the same thing, generation after generation? Furthermore, understandably, if music is something this ingrained in us, and if science says that I am hardwired to dislike new music, what do I do when I'm faced with it? I don't want to be left in the dust like those jerks who didn't like Beethoven. I want to hang out with Tom's grandma and listen to the Beatles. Grandma would have loved you guys, by the way. Well, calm down, everybody. Science has good news. It's called neuroplasticity. It's a relatively new science. It's changing as we learn new things, but it gives us hope. Basically, what the research says is that your brain can change. The more you listen to new and different kinds of music, the more that you think about it, you listen about it, the more your brain will make new connections. It will develop new neural pathways. And incidentally, one of the reasons why young people tend to pick up on new music faster than their parents do is because their brains are younger as well. Those neural pathways are a little bit more flexible. They're not as firmed up. But that does not mean that that is game over for the older generation. No, no. In fact, the research suggests that no matter how old you are, your brain can still rewire itself. And if you work hard enough and your mind is open enough, then suddenly, the more you listen to it, that music that your kid plays in the car that you can't stand, you may start to like it. You may start to love it. But if you don't start to love it, you may at least start to understand it. And understanding is the key here. Because if you think about all those times that music made you feel united to the people around you, if you remember how you felt in those moments, then you can see how understanding some new music might be the first step to making a real connection with somebody. You understand their music now. You can start that conversation. You can start to bridge those gaps. It could be somebody you know, like a family member. Maybe somebody you don't know. Maybe somebody you may have never talked to before. And this is just me speculating here. But if we can do this with music, if we can get out of our own way and just let our mind do what it does, who says we can't do it with art? Maybe we can do it with food. Maybe we can even do it with ideas. And think of the implications of that. Think of how far we could go as a society if all these things that once divided us became tools to unite us. Think of what we could accomplish. Think of the things we could do. So I think that we should keep endeavoring to have these new experiences, to push ourselves out of our own comfort zones, to look for new things to understand, new ways to make connections. And if you like this idea, if you think it's worth a shot, but you don't know where to start, then I encourage you to start by listening to some new music. Because I truly believe that if we could understand each other's music, we could come one step closer to understanding each other. Thank you very much.